Now,
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
5:06 this Wednesday morning in your nation's capital. It's Wednesday morning. That means at 6:35 we're going to speak with Cal Thomas. 7:05 Susan Crabtree, Real Clear Politics on the unfolding story of the Secret Service. 7:35 Charlie Gasparino, Fox Business on what's next for the economy. And then at 8:35 Tom Bevan, Real Clear Politics. And we'll get some polling numbers from him. I'm Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Julie, things got really interesting now that Tim Walz is officially the running mate for Kamala Harris, didn't it? It's clarifying. It's really clarifying.
It really is.
If anybody
interesting is one way to say it.
Anybody on the fence about, geez, I don't know who I should vote for, Kamala or Trump. By the way, I want to meet that person.
Yeah.
I want to meet the person who even up until yesterday was undecided between these two people, between Trump and Kamala Harris. But if you're wondering if Kamala Harris is as radical and Marxist as all of the sound bites from her 2020 presidential campaign suggest, it's just been affirmed with the decision to have Tim Walz be one heartbeat away from the presidency. Should she come on the winning side on election day in November. This guy, I guess they're trying to show him in a flannel shirt and hanging out with farm animals, and he's just a good old centrist, regular American guy.
Yeah, and also they've got these sort of code words: Midwest, right? Mm-hmm. Regular, every guy, Midwestern kind of values. He could not be further from. I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Illinois, actually, and I didn't just grow up. When people say they grew up in Illinois, I'm like, where? And people are like, Chicago. I'm like, that's not the Midwest. I grew up in farm country, central Illinois. Okay, he is about as far away from a Midwesterner as they come. He wants to strip parents of their rights. He wants to open the border. I mean, every possible leftist position he takes. This is not Midwestern values.
If you think of the state of Minnesota over the last, several years, last 5 years, the one thing that pops out is the George Floyd killing and the Black Lives Matter riots. And he literally let the cities burn.
He admits it.
1,500 burned buildings. And the mayor said, please send us the National Guard. And he refused.
Leftist mayor.
That's right.
The leftist defund the police mayor was like, please help us.
We need the National Guard. He refused to send the National Guard because he wanted the cities to burn. He thought that it was important.
And people are like, oh, come on, like, stop throwing around the word Marxist. When you look at what Marxists want to do, they want to destroy things. They want to destroy everything and then build it back up in this sort of Marxist vision. And destroying cities, destroying families, destroying the border, destroying the national identity. These are his goals.
Julie, we don't have to call him a socialist. This is him 1 week ago on that White Dudes for Harris call. This is him speaking, out of his own mouth.
But we can get out there, reach out, make the case. And for one thing, don't ever shy away from our progressive values. One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness.
What?
I mean, there you go.
He set up a snitch line during COVID. You call that neighborliness? That is straight out of Germany. I mean,
one person's socialism is, and by the way, at least he admits, he says, our progressive values, and then he immediately concedes, socialism. Our progressive values are in fact socialism. But yes, the snitch line. Well, the snitch line is really most relevant after you hear this clip of his speech yesterday in Philadelphia, which was half stand-up routine, half shouting and denigrating Republicans. And listen to this.
Some of us in here are old enough to remember. I see you down there. I see those old white guys. Some of us are old enough to remember when it was Republicans who were talking about freedom. It turns out now what they meant was the government should be free to invade your doctor's office. In Minnesota, we respect our neighbors and their personal choices that they make. Even if we wouldn't make the same choice for ourselves, there's a golden rule. Mind your own damn business.
Now, set aside for a moment the bastardization of the Christian ideal of the golden rule, which is to do unto others as you would have them do unto you, which is, by the way, not the same thing as mind your own damn business. But the idea that this man suggested in Minnesota the way he governed was to mind your own business when, yes, Julie, 100% accurate, he literally set up a 24/7 phone line for people to snitch on their neighbors if they were violating any of his authoritarian COVID-19 mandates that he set down for that state.
This sort of weird appeal to libertarianism of like mind your own business, let me just live my life, is so weird when you consider his record. Not only the snitch line, let's be clear, he wants to take parental rights away from parents. If a child with comorbidities like autism or body dysphoria or any number of depression, anxiety, then presents to, a teacher or a counselor that, they want to identify, they kind of get involved in this trend of gender transitioning.
Change your name, change your clothes when you come to school.
If a parent objects, the state will come in and take away your rights and then transition your child. Let's
be clear, because I just want to, because you sometimes, Julie, you're in the world of policy and IWF and comment. Let's be clear, because you infringe on parental rights. He wants the government to take your child away from you.
That's right.
That's what that means. Infringe on parental rights. He wants the government to take your child from you if you don't want to disfigure their genitals. If the government says you should disfigure their genitals. I'm sorry for
no, I appreciate it. You're right.
There,
it can be kind of wonkish
it's
sometimes.
It's important for people to know that.
But this is a guy who says we respect our neighbor's privacy.
That's right. Mind your own damn business.
Mind your own business. We respect people's decisions. We want to. The right wants to get in your doctor's office. Wait a minute. You're going to snatch away a child for not medicalizing them.
He thinks sanctuary cities and sanctuary states are fantastic and advocated for them. He celebrated that this is like 10, 15 years ago, states started giving driver's licenses to illegal aliens. And that was before we could see the chaos that it wreaked. And also, it was before the Biden disaster at the border. In the middle of all that, in 2023, he signed the law giving illegal aliens driver's license. He just did it. He was asked about the wall. He said, you want to build a wall? I'll invest in a ladder company so that people can climb over that wall. You heard him brag about socialism. He claimed that if you criticized Biden's performance, by the way, on the job, that you were guilty of ageism. And up until 2 weeks ago, continued to maintain that Joe Biden was completely capable of being president of the United States. After the Black Lives Matter riots in his city, in his state, he went on a speaking tour apologizing for his white guilt and his white privilege and said that our state it has systemic racism in its entirety. But I do love these whiter-than-white politicians who are in power that then use and exploit these incidents like the George Floyd death to say, yeah, that's right, white people are bad, and since I'm in charge, I'll be the one to fix it all. Yeah, if all these white problems and this white racism exist, why don't you step aside and let a black man do the job? But no, he wouldn't do that, not in a millisecond. This man is the most odious, most duplicitous, most radical kind of choice Kamala Harris could make. And Julie, it's a beautiful thing.
It is a gift. And
this is the greatest gift to the Republicans.
It really is. And, this sort of idea that he's just this good old Midwestern folksy guy because he wears a camo baseball cap occasionally and wears jeans. That is the left really believes that will convince people. That's how stupid they think the American public is. Because
the left looks at the world through a lens of stereotypes. And they go, well, hey, he wears a flannel shirt and a camo cap. Of course, white guys will love him. White guys will love him. He hunts. Yeah. we'll shed a little light on that. And I'll tell you about the media spin that's already begun. We'll play you some clips from his speech yesterday and tell you who the real Tim Walz is in just a moment. First, though, it's
WMAL.
Making sense of the news.
Live.
From the Home Paramount Pest Control Studios.
Home Paramount, the leader in pest control since 1939.
The idea that Tim Walz is some lefty is just not true in reality. He got elected in a district that was very moderate.
Walz, of course, was very moderate in Congress.
Establishing himself as a moderate Democrat.
He had a pretty moderate record, rather moderate Democrat, viewed as a moderate Democrat.
He is a centrist. To say that he's more liberal than Vice President Harris or the most liberal congressman, which I'm sure we're going to hear, just not true.
In Congress, he was certainly a centrist, but a more centrist deal-making candidate.
Kind of a centrist Midwesterner persona.
Once again, this is why the American people reject and hate the media because, well, they'll just lie to you. You heard the caveat there. So many of these Washington, D.C.-based reporters or anchors who only look at the world through the spectrum of what happens in Washington, D.C. Tim Walz had a moderate voting record when he was in Congress. Well, he represented a district that was not radical left like, you know, most blue cities in America. And so he had to have a more moderate voting record when in Congress. But once and by the way, he lost re-election despite his moderate record to a Republican. And then he went full tilt squad. How he voted in his, handful of terms in Congress is irrelevant. What kind of governor has he been? That's what matters. And they're just he's centrist. He's centrist. Let me tell you how centrist he is. One of the two biggest glowing accolades yesterday for this pick were from Randy Weingarten and the American Federation of Teachers and from the Democrat Socialists of America. When you're a centrist and the socialists are celebrating you, you're not a centrist. In fact, let me read you what the socialists said, because it's not just, we're happy that they picked this guy. No, they're bragging about their power and influence, Julie. Harris choosing Walz as a running mate has shown the world that Democrat Socialists of America and our allies on the left are a force that cannot be ignored. Through collective action, DSA and the U.S. left more broadly have made it clear that change is needed. DSA members organized in our workplaces, and they go on, talking about how they made this happen. He is the socialists' pick, leaving Josh Shapiro in the dust, by the way. Which and Julie, we just finished our last segment by saying this is a gift to Republicans. I really was concerned that they would pick Josh Shapiro. Josh Shapiro would have been a really smart pick.
Yeah, it would have been, and it would have conveyed something to the Democrat base that we have picked someone to moderate Kamala's more leftist positions. Yep. Now they have doubled down, and this is clearly the most radical ticket the Democrats we've ever seen from the Democrat
Party. Of all
Party.
the choices that she had, and I want to be clear here, by the way, he's a DEI hire, in case you missed that. He is. DEI hires go in multiple directions. They wanted diversity on the ticket, so they had to have a white guy. If you look at think about that for a minute. Wes Moore, governor of Maryland, I'm not a big fan, but he's an attractive possibility. Nope. Sorry, Wes Moore, you're ineligible because you're black. Cory Booker, not going to happen. You're black. Blacks and Latinos need not apply for this job. No women either. We're just looking for a white guy.
And no Jews.
Oh, certainly no Jews. That was the big problem with Josh
But Larry,
Shapiro.
Really quickly, I know we're up on a break, but it's not just a white guy. It's Wilfred Brimley. It is this sort of my dad. When you look at this guy, you think, he's practically a Republican. Like, just look at him, right? He's an old white guy, because that's what old white guys have become, is like they're Republican. White guys are Republicans, right? And so I think they've actually picked the image of moderate, of reasonable, of fatherly goodness, right? And again, it just shows what they think of the average American voter, that they're stupid and that they can be manipulated. Because you look at his record, I mean, it is wild. And I know we'll get into this later, But I mean, the comments from his wife, the actions of his daughter during the BLM protests. I mean, this is a radically leftist family. It's not just him. It's like, his whole world is radically left. So that'll be exposed. So that's why this is a gift.
Kamala Harris has reinforced the direction of the Democrats Party, and it's not the direction of the Josh Shapiros of the world. It's tragic for those of you who actually would like both of our major political parties to not be hostile to Jewish Americans. Poor Josh Shapiro giving this speech in Philadelphia where everyone expected him to be the pick. And he had to stand there and say, I'm proud of my faith. He couldn't even say...
After he had to walk back his support for Israel.
Just to be considered on the ticket. He couldn't even say, I'm proud to be Jewish, by the way. He couldn't say the words Jewish. He had to say, I'm proud of my faith. It was a lamentable and sad display. But again, a gift to Republicans. Picking Josh Shapiro would have pretty much taken Pennsylvania off the map for Donald Trump. It also would have sent the signal that, no, we're not as crazy radical as everyone thinks we are. Well, guess what? They are. They are, in fact, worse. They're more radical than you ever thought because they just rewarded the man who let his state burn on the lie of BLM and riots because, white privilege and all. That's where they are, and we've defined exactly what the two parties stand for. Let the games begin.
Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 5:36 on this Wednesday, middle of a busy, busy week in your nation's capital. And we got you covered here on O'Connor and Company. Coming up at 6:35, Cal Thomas. It's 7:05, Susan Crabtree, Real Clear Politics on the Secret Service story. 7:35, Charlie Gasparino of Fox Business on the roller coaster that is the American economy. And at 8:35, Tom Bevan, Real Clear Politics. It's Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Julie.
Good morning.
You mentioned Mrs. Walz, the First Lady of Minnesota. She would be the second lady of the United States should Kamala Harris win the presidential election. And I think it's noteworthy to take a listen to this moment in the aftermath of the riots that destroyed 1,500 buildings, businesses, homes, people's life savings, violence, death, all as a result of the George Floyd incident in the state of Minnesota. Here's the First Lady of that state, Tim Walz's wife, reflecting on the riots, the devastating riots.
I would say those first days, when there were riots, I could smell the burning tires. And that was a very real thing, and I kept the windows open for as long as I could because I felt like that was such a touchstone of what was happening.
Yikes.
In the safety of the governor's mansion with walls and protection and armed guards and security, she laid there in her white privilege bed and kept the windows open so she could smell people's businesses and homes burning to the ground. And that made her feel just this delightful blanket of guilt that she's now bragging about, Julie. And again, these are real human beings that were devastated by these riots and these fires. And it must be reiterated, Tim Walz refused to send in the National Guard.
He did. And he
wanted those riots.
He did. And he did reflect on that later on. He said that he got calls, and I love this. He got calls from friends of his, right? It's always nice to have a friend in the governor, right? Then you can give him a call and tell him that, your neighborhood is burning around you. And he said, he basically admitted, he said, I made a mistake.
Sorry.
I made a mistake. I should have sent in the National Guard. I should have reacted. So he admits that he did a bad job.
Let's not forget it was Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas who wrote an op-ed saying the National Guard has to be called in on these things, and the New York Times revolted. The managing director or executive editor of the New York Times had to quit because he dared to let a Republican senator publish an op-ed that said bring in the National Guard. Here's the left-wing defund the police mayor of Minneapolis talking about this moment.
Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Frey has consistently said what he told us on June 2nd.
I will speak the truth. And the truth is that on Wednesday, around 6 p.m.,
I called the governor and asked for the National Guard.
Text messages and emails from the mayor's office for Wednesday, May 27th back that up.
And yet Tim Walz refused. And now, this isn't just about Black Lives Matters. It's not just about riots. This is about competence. During his entire time as governor, Tim Walz had one moment of truth where in the position of the chief executive of that state that has, a certain amount of power and a certain amount of responsibility, one of the most important things is deploy the National Guard when appropriate, and he failed. And now he's being rewarded as elevated to the highest possible levels of our government.
That's right. I think it's worth remembering that that during this exact time there were BLM riots everywhere, including Washington, D.C. And they were starting to deface some of our most important memorials. And Trump, he requested it, and then they deployed the National Guard to the Lincoln Memorial. And there are all these images of National Guard standing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, protecting it, okay? And my God, the reaction, Larry, I don't know if you remember, the reaction, and literally the Washington Post, this dystopian Lincoln Memorial photo raises a grim question. Will they protect us or will they shoot us? They were going completely hysterical. And this was the right thing to do, to protect our memorials, to protect tourists who were going to these memorials. And the reaction was crazy. So, even when some Republican or some more law and order politicians did deploy the National Guard, the media went nuts. Right. And this was what it was like during
the media and the radical leftists and the Democrat Party wanted the riots to continue.
Yes.
Tim Walz accommodated that demand. He led the charge in allowing the riots to continue, allowing the vandalism to continue, the looting to continue, the arson to continue, the violence to continue, and in some cases, the murders to continue. Tim Walz was the poster child of letting our country burn. Why? Because they wanted anger and unrest. Because they wanted people to be angry at Trump, and they wanted to win the election. He's being rewarded now for that.
That's right.
He's being elevated as the running mate for Kamala Harris. And it tells you everything you need to know about Kamala Harris, that this is the choice she made. This is the man that she thinks, in her judgment, not only would be the best person to step in as president should anything happen to her, God forbid, but also she thinks that picking him is going to be a home run for winning the election.
It does also tell you, though, that she made this decision. This isn't the party saying, you're kind of radical. Let's pick a more moderate guy. Shapiro really is your guy. No, this is her. You can tell this is her. She wants a running mate she feels comfortable with, that won't overshadow her, that won't question her, that won't try to moderate her. This is 100% Kamala's pick.
More on Tim Walz and the prospect of a J.D. Vance-Tim Walz debate, what that might look like is
WMAL, more than just politics, because laughter is the best medicine. Download the WMAL app to stream us for free.
Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota. And by the way, nothing says, I'm trying to appeal to middle America and purple states and centrists than choosing one of the most leftist, if not the, he is Gavin Newsom with a Midwestern haircut. The policies in Minnesota mirror exactly Gavin Newsom's California. Not just the illegal immigrant things, not just the trans stuff. Minnesota is a sanctuary state. If you want to bring your 9-year-old to get chemical castration pharmaceuticals prescribed for their gender transition, Minnesota will welcome you with open arms. It's a safe space. You want to abort your baby up until the moment of birth. Minnesota's your place. In fact, there's even language in his abortion law that allows for, a botched abortion, which means a baby was accidentally born alive. You can take care of that too, Governor Ralph Northam style, if you're in Minnesota. That's who Tim Walz is. And Minnesota, Julie, it literally, in terms of presidential electoral politics, is the bluest state in America. It is the only state that didn't go for Ronald Reagan in 1984. The last time Minnesota went for a Republican president was over 50 years ago. Richard Nixon, 1972. That's how blue Minnesota is.
Yeah.
This was not an appeal to blue-collar rural voters who went with Trump years ago. No, this is to shore up
radical.
Kamala's
Absolutely.
power. Yeah.
And it's just it's strange to me. It was a strange political decision. I mean, I really can't wrap my head around it. I mean, I don't think that Minnesotans were going to go for Trump because they didn't like Shapiro enough. I mean, I understand there's a lot of people who think it was because he was Jewish, but I'm
a lot of credible people.
Look, I'm one of those people too. I'm just saying, but I think if Shapiro had been on the ticket, it's not like Minnesota would have been like, oh, we're definitely going for Trump Vance. I do not understand this. I think she had Minnesota to begin with, so I really don't understand doubling down on crazy liberal. Because again, I think she already had that state. Now she really is in danger of losing Pennsylvania.
This wasn't to shore up Minnesota, I don't think. Listen, you'll have to ask them about their political strategy. I think that I don't know. I really don't know. I don't think it was necessarily for Minnesota. I think it was to have this image. They're all about image. They're selling a product. And you're right. They like that this guy looks like your typical
I mean, I agree. I think that it wasn't to shore up. I just don't understand because you really are at risk of losing other states now that you need it. Pennsylvania being one of them.
Either that or they're overly confident that they've got those states. I don't know. But here's an amazing moment on CNN last night. Abby Phillips specifically talking about the Josh Shapiro situation.
And I think ultimately Shapiro, I think fit is important. But I also think that when you
listen to her stammering as she
knows
the truth, and she's just got to force herself to say it.
I know.
Look at the principle of do no harm. Maybe they did say, in a state like Minnesota, do we want to those 100,000 uncommitted voters who came out about the Gaza war? Do we want to antagonize those voters? Those are all part of the questions as well.
Can I just say? Tim Walz also spoke.
Antagonize those voters is a really interesting way to say it.
Yeah, do we want to antagonize those bigots?
Right. Well, and Jake Tapper, I suppose, to his modicum of credit for doing the bare minimum, actually wants to flesh that out.
So, one point on the Gaza war, Shapiro has the same position on Israel that Governor Walz, that Senator Kelly has. He's actually been more critical of Netanyahu than the other two, but he is Jewish. And
he's also the face of the crackdown on the protests, right? He spoke very vehemently.
No. That Jake Tapper said it. I love that the one commentator wants to shift the question. No, he's Jewish. Jews need not apply. Wow. That's the Democrats right now.
Yep.
We've come a long, and what a disgrace. This is the year that we lost the iconic statesman Joe Lieberman.
Oh, yeah.
The first Jewish American to be on a ticket. And sadly, he was teamed with Al Gore. Would have been interesting to see if John McCain had actually picked Joe Lieberman back in 2008 to see if that would have made a difference. I don't know. 2008 was such a tipping point for so much of American politics that we're living through right now, including this moment. But Jake Tapper fleshed it out there. Oh, what do you mean antagonize the voters in Minnesota?
Abby Phillips goes full on, okay, well, we're going to antagonize the anti-Semites.
And then Jewish.
And then Jake Tapper very directly asked that question. And then Addie Cornish is quick to say, no, we meant what we mean was he was the face of crackdowns on campus
We know
protests.
exactly what they meant. Van Jones.
Yeah.
Van Jones, again, give him his due. At least he's intellectually honest.
Just a little bit. Hey, listen, the conservatives, the right wing, the Republicans, they were chewing their fingernails down to the knuckle because they were afraid of a Josh Shapiro. They were afraid of a Mark Kelly. They're not as afraid of this new governor because they think they can define him. Here's the challenge you got.
He's defined himself.
Yeah.
And people don't want to talk about it. We got to talk about it. On the one hand, you have a lot of young people who are concerned about Gaza. You have a lot of Muslims and Arabs and others. They have not felt seen by the Biden administration. You start hearing that genocide joke. That was building. And so those folks needed to have a candidate that they could feel comfortable with. This helps them in that regard. But you also have anti-Semitism that has gotten marbled into this party.
Marbled.
Marbled.
Wow.
Palestinians without being an anti-Jewish bigot. But there are some anti-Jewish bigots out there. And there's some disquiet now, and there has to be. How much of what just happened is caving into some of these darker parts in the party?
That's right.
Darker
and
parts,
how much will voters reward that?
Yeah.
Because that's part of
Let's
the choice
talk
here.
about the darker parts where Josh Shapiro had to walk back in support of Israel and had to sort of be quiet about being Jewish. Is that the marbling in? I mean, talk about, look, credit to Van Jones, but my God, talk about nicely saying that there is a lot of anti-Semitism within the Democrat Party, rabid anti-Semites in the Democrat Party. Cori Bush, Rashida Tlaib, these are the base now of the Democrat Party.
Not Cori Bush anymore after last night, and we'll
know.
give you that information a little later, too. But keep it here. We got you covered. It's 5:54.